had a different set of aspirations, and her aspirations are more than fulfilled. So in a sense, this mother and daughter-in-law dialogue summarizes the great Indian effort to bring about growth with equity, of which financial inclusion is a necessary, though not at all a sufficient condition. So I will not repeat once more the well-known statistics of financial inclusion that all of you know. Some of them were alluded to by Mr. Sriram. I will also not bother to define either financial inclusion or inclusive finance beyond the intuitive definitions that you have. And let me tell you that the scholarly definitions are no different than the intuitive ones. Indeed, Mr. Sriram was very pleased, and I was smiling at Alok across the table, that two of the quotes that you gave were from committees where I was a member, and indeed I drafted those definitions. The first one on financial inclusion is from the Rangarajan committee, and the G20 Toronto Declaration was also drafted by me as chair of CGAP. So I'm delighted that these things find circulation, are read and quoted. I thought they're just forgotten thereafter. Anyway, so since this is XLRI and since we are in the learning center, very impressive international learning center, I'll try to keep my speech focused on theoretical and academic issues, but definitely as informed by a practitioner. So I'm addressing first and foremost the faculty and the PhD students. It's a real pity that I can't stay on day 3 when there's this wonderful, it's a great idea, sir, to have the PhD students present their work in such a seminar. I just read the topics, there were no abstracts, but from the topics I could make out that a lot of them are very, very empirical work, very useful. So, for you, first a bit of history, and then a bit of the future. So the market in the world of finance always existed. From pre-biblical times, it was there. The issue is intervening in those markets. There was a time when there was just the elites who mattered. Even in the Athenian democracy, there were just the nobles and then there were the slaves. And even great philosophers like Plato only worried about the nobles. So as long as finance served the purpose of the elite, the rulers, it was fine. The problem of inclusion began only as recently as 300 or 400 years ago. And in India it began roughly about 150 years ago when the British started having permanent settlement for land revenue and started collecting land revenue in cash. That's when the subsistence Indian farmer suddenly realized that he has to participate in the monetary world. And particularly in those years when he was already food deficit, he had not only to borrow for eating, but that was in time, he had to borrow to pay the land revenue in cash. And if you read the book Feeding the Banya, which is a history of the moneylender class in India by Hardiman, it clearly shows that the need for more inclusive finance began because of this imposition by the state. And indeed, therefore, the state had to correct it, because by the 1860s, there were the peasant rebellions in Maharashtra, the Maratha rebellions, in response to famine, and the British rulers realized that they'll have to do something about this. They started giving what are called Takavi loans, loans out of the revenue in bad years, so that farmers could, get by. And There's a report on Takavi loans which was done after about 12 years of experience, and it reads like any other report on financial inclusion, that the usage is poor, that only the larger farmers are able to benefit, and that there is corruption in the process of giving. This is 1876. So, the British rulers started thinking about alternatives, and some of them had heard of the German Raiffeisen system and imported that and established cooperatives. The first Indian credit cooperatives are from the 1880s, 1890s. Indeed, the Indian Cooperative Act is from 1904. So that was the first state intervention in credit to make it more inclusive. And I'll just fast forward all the way till post-independence, when the Gorawara Committee, the Rural Credit Inquiry Committee in 1951, started its work, gave out its report in 54, and showed that only 7% of households had any access to formal or institutional credit. 93% did not have. And a year later, when the Imperial Bank was made the State Bank of India, 400 branches were opened in hinterland India. You might say that was the second attempt by the state to at least broaden access to finance. Went on, again fast forward, 1960s, near famines, the Bihar famine, 66. India tries very hard to become food self-sufficient. The Green Revolution is ushered in, and immediately the need for credit becomes absolutely important. So, first Indira Gandhi imposes social control on banks for 2 years.